She told her parents I cheated so they would side with her after she cheated first. She didn't just break my heart, she tried to burn my entire life to the ground, and she almost got away with it. Hey everyone, before we get into the video, don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button if you want more stories just like this. Thanks for the support. My name is Grace, and I'm 24. For 2 years, I thought I was building a life with the person I was going to marry. Her name was Sabrina, and from the moment we met, it felt like destiny. She wasn't just my girlfriend, she was the center of my universe, the person I told everything to, the one who made even the most mundane days feel bright. My family adored her. My mom would gush about how polite and thoughtful she was, how she always brought a dessert to Sunday dinners. My dad, a man of few words, would light up when she walked into the room, engaging her in long conversations about her career goals. My younger siblings saw her as the cool older sister they never had. She was woven into the very fabric of our family, a perfect, vibrant thread in the tapestry of our lives. We spent holidays together, took family vacations, and talked about our future. A small house with a big yard, a dog, maybe kids someday. The picture was so perfect, it felt like a painting. But even the most beautiful paintings can have cracks you don't see until you're standing right in front of them. The first signs were subtle, little shifts in the atmosphere that I dismissed as my own paranoia. Sabrina became more possessive of her phone, angling it away from me whenever a notification lit up the screen. She started working late more often, a plausible excuse that I didn't question. She became more irritable, her patience wearing thin over small things that never used to bother her. I'd ask if everything was okay, and she'd offer a tired smile, a wave of her hand, and a vague explanation about stress at work. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. The alternative was a dark, terrifying thought I pushed to the back of my mind, a monster I refused to let out of its cage. I told myself I was being insecure, that all long-term relationships hit rough patches. I doubled down on my affection, trying to be the perfect, supportive partner, hoping my love could smooth out the wrinkles I was beginning to see. I planned a surprise weekend getaway for our anniversary, booked a cabin in the woods, and imagined the two of us reconnecting, leaving the stress behind. I was so sure I could fix whatever was slowly pulling us apart. The night it ended, it wasn't a dramatic shouting match. It was quiet, cold, and utterly devastating. We were sitting on the couch, a space that had always felt like our sanctuary, but that night it felt like a courtroom. She wouldn't look at me, her gaze fixed on a spot on the wall just over my shoulder. When she finally spoke, her voice was flat, devoid of any emotion. She said she thought we needed a break, that she felt we were growing in different directions. I was stunned, speechless. I asked her what I had done wrong, what I could do to fix it. She just shook her head. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. It was the only crack in her composure, and it felt like a dagger in my heart. She said it wasn't my fault, it was hers, a classic line that felt anything but. She packed a bag that night and left, leaving me in a silence so loud it was deafening. I sat on that couch for hours, the world I had so carefully built crumbling around me, the surprise trip reservations burning a hole in my computer's history. The next morning, my phone rang. It was my mom. My mother's voice on the phone was like ice. "Grace," she began, skipping any form of greeting. "Sabrina told us what happened. How could you?" My mind went blank. Told them what? What happened was she broke my heart and walked out. I stammered, trying to understand, asking what she was talking about. The sigh on the other end of the line was long and weary, the kind of sigh reserved for profound disappointment. "She told us you cheated," my mom said, her voice cracking slightly. "She said you'd been seeing someone else for weeks and that you broke up with her via a text message last night. Is it true?" The accusation hung in the air, a poison cloud seeping into every corner of my reality. I felt the floor drop out from under me. It was so outrageous, so completely fabricated that I couldn't even form a coherent response. I denied it, of course, my voice a frantic, desperate thing. I told her the truth, that Sabrina was the one who ended things, that she had given me some vague excuse about needing space. But it was no use. The story Sabrina had spun was a masterpiece of manipulation, tailored perfectly to make her the victim and me the villain. She had gotten to them first. She had weaponized their love for her and their trust in her character against me. My mother didn't believe me. She said my denial was exactly what a guilty person would say. The call ended with her telling me she was so disappointed in me, and that she needed time to process it. I hung up, my hand shaking, a feeling of absolute isolation washing over me. I was not just heartbroken, I was an outcast. The person who had been my biggest supporter, my partner in crime, had systematically dismantled my entire support system. She hadn't just left me, she had made sure I would be utterly and completely alone in my pain. I spent the next 2 days in a fog of grief and rage, replaying every conversation, every moment, looking for the clue I had missed. How could I have been so blind? How could she be so cruel? I felt like I was living in a parallel universe where up was down and right was wrong. My own family, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, had chosen her. They had chosen a lie over their own daughter. I was drowning in their judgment with no life raft in sight. On the third day, as I stared at my phone, contemplating just disappearing, a new message appeared on my screen. It was from my cousin, Cameron. We weren't incredibly close, but we were friendly. The message was short, cryptic, and the first thing in days that felt like a lifeline. It read, "We need to talk about Sabrina." The message from Cameron was a spark in the suffocating darkness. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Part of me was so beaten down that I didn't have the energy to engage with anyone, to relive the trauma again. But another part of me, a tiny, stubborn ember of hope, was intrigued. Why Cameron? She had always been a bit on the periphery of my relationship with Sabrina, polite but never overly friendly. I remembered a few family gatherings where Cameron had given Sabrina a look I couldn't quite decipher, a mix of skepticism and scrutiny I had dismissed at the time. I replied with a simple, "Okay, when?" She suggested we meet at a neutral coffee shop the next afternoon, a place far from our families and the prying eyes of our shared history. Walking into that coffee shop felt like stepping into a secret meeting. Cameron was already there, nursing a black coffee in a corner booth. She looked up as I approached. Her expression serious but not judgmental. There was no pity in her eyes, only a direct, steady gaze that made me feel, for the first time in days, like I was being seen. I sat down, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. I just stared at the tabletop, bracing myself for another round of accusations. But Cameron didn't start with questions. She started with a statement. "I never trusted her," she said, her voice low but firm. There was always something performative about her, like she was playing a role. I looked up, shocked. It was the first time anyone had voiced a negative opinion of Sabrina to me. Cameron explained that Sabrina had been flirting with her younger brother, Kevin, for weeks. My stomach clenched. Kevin was a good-looking, charming kid who was easily impressed. It was a plausible, sickening scenario. Cameron said Kevin had been flattered at first, enjoying the attention from an older, sophisticated woman. But as the messages became more explicit and Sabrina started complaining about our relationship, he began to feel uncomfortable and guilty. He finally showed the messages to Cameron a few days ago, right around the time of the breakup. Cameron then reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. Her hands were steady as she unlocked it and pulled up a folder. She slid the phone across the table to me. "I think you need to see this," she said softly. My heart was pounding in my chest as I looked down at the screen. There, in a chain of screenshots, was the undeniable truth. The messages started innocently enough, a few flirty emojis, a comment on a social media post. But they quickly escalated. There were messages from Sabrina to Kevin, sent late at night while I was asleep in the next room, talking about how unfulfilled she was. There were messages arranging to meet up in secret, describing what she wanted to do to him. And then there were the messages sent after she had left my apartment. In them, she was bragging. She told Kevin she had played my family like a fiddle,
That she had told them I cheated so they would hate me and she could walk away without any blame. The dates on the messages were irrefutable proof. The affair had been happening for months, long before she had ended things with me. I stared at the screen, a storm of emotions raging inside me: shock, fury, vindication, and a profound, bone-deep sadness. It was all there, the whole ugly truth in black and white. I looked up at Cameron, my eyes burning with unshed tears. "What do I do with this?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The question hung in the air between us, heavy with possibility. What do I do with this? The power in my hands was terrifying. A part of me, the part that was still raw and wounded, wanted to blast those screenshots all over social media, to expose Sabrina for the manipulative liar she was. I wanted to see her world burn the way she had tried to burn mine. But Cameron, ever the strategist, talked me down. She pointed out that a public spectacle would only make me look desperate and bitter. It would give Sabrina a platform to play the victim again, claiming I was fabricating evidence in a fit of rage. "No," she said, "the real audience for this wasn't the world. It was my family. They were the ones who had convicted me without a trial. They were the ones who needed to see the evidence." We decided on a plan. It was dramatic, almost cinematic, but it felt necessary. We would wait for the next Sunday dinner. It was a weekly ritual at my parents' house, a sacred family time that Sabrina had always been a part of. Her absence would be a silent, screaming statement before I even said a word. The week leading up to that dinner was the longest of my life. I practiced what I would say in the mirror, my voice shaking at first, then growing stronger with each repetition. I wasn't just defending myself, I was on a mission to reclaim my own history. When Sunday arrived, I walked into my parents' house with a calm I didn't know I possessed. The atmosphere was as cold as I expected. My mom gave me a tight, forced smile before turning back to the stove. My dad just nodded curtly from his armchair, buried in a newspaper. My siblings barely acknowledged my presence. The dinner conversation was stilted and awkward, a minefield of unspoken accusations. I ate my meal in silence, the weight of Cameron's phone in my pocket feeling like a lead brick. After dessert, when the coffee was being served and the lull in conversation felt most profound, I knew it was time. I pushed my chair back, the scraping sound cutting through the quiet. All eyes turned to me, a mix of curiosity and apprehension on their faces. I stood up, my heart hammering against my ribs, but my voice was steady. I told them I was glad they were all here because there was something I needed to clear up. I looked at each of them, my mom, my dad, my sister, my brother. I said that I had been accused of a terrible thing, that I had spent the last week being treated like a criminal in my own home. I told them that the story they had been told was a complete and total lie. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't cry. I just stated the facts, calmly and clearly. Then I pulled out my phone. I had forwarded the screenshots from Cameron to myself. I walked over to my dad and handed in the phone. "I think you should see the real reason Sabrina and I broke up," I said. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched as my dad's eyes scanned the screen, his brow furrowing in confusion, then shock. My mom came to stand behind him, peering over his shoulder. I saw her hand fly to her mouth, a small, horrified gasp escaping her lips. My sister and brother crowded in, their faces morphing from judgment to disbelief, and finally to a dawning, sickening comprehension. The evidence was irrefutable. The dates, the words, the triumphant, cruel gloating from Sabrina, it was all there. My dad finally looked up from the phone, his face ashen, his eyes filled with a new, terrible emotion. It wasn't anger anymore, it was shame. He looked at me, his voice barely a whisper, as he asked one simple, earth-shattering question. "Is this real?" My own voice was surprisingly steady as I answered my father. "Yes," I said, my gaze unwavering. "It's all real." I then gestured to Cameron, who had been waiting quietly in the car per our plan. I had asked her to come in for this part to provide independent verification. I explained that the screenshots had come from her, that Sabrina had been carrying on with her brother Kevin for months. Hearing it from a third party, from another family member, seemed to seal the truth in a way my own testimony couldn't. The dam broke. My mother burst into tears, not quiet, gentle tears, but racking, gut-wrenching sobs of guilt and regret. She rushed over to me, wrapping her arms around me, apologizing over and over again. "I'm so sorry, Grace. I'm so sorry. I didn't believe you. Why didn't I believe my own daughter?" Her words were a balm on the open wound, but the tissue was still too tender for the pain to simply vanish. I hugged her back, but a part of me remained detached, an observer to this emotional storm. My dad was a portrait of quiet devastation. He put the phone down on the table with a soft click, as if it were a dangerous object. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a father's remorse. He didn't apologize with words, but his expression said everything. He had failed me. He had listened to a charming lie instead of his own child's truth. He walked over and placed a heavy hand on my shoulder, a gesture of silent, profound apology that meant more than 1,000 words. My siblings were also in various states of shock and remorse. My sister, who had been so quick to judge, was crying quietly, her face buried in her hands. My brother just stood there, shaking his head, looking at the floor as if he couldn't bear to meet my eyes. The family dynamic had been shattered and was now hastily, clumsily, trying to reform itself around a new, painful truth. The villain they had created in their minds didn't exist. The real villain was a ghost, a manipulative presence they had welcomed into their home with open arms. The immediate impulse from my family was a desire for retribution. My dad wanted to call Sabrina's parents. My mom wanted to drive over to her apartment and give her a piece of her mind. But I stopped them. I told them that confronting her would be a waste of energy. It would be giving her exactly what she craved: more drama, more attention. My victory wasn't in her punishment. It was in their knowing the truth. The power was no longer hers. It was mine. I had reclaimed my narrative. I told them that my relationship with Sabrina was over, and so was any connection our family had with her. The chapter was closed. Leaving my parents' house that night felt different than I had arrived. I didn't walk out as the shamed, defeated daughter. I walked out with my head held high, an adult who had been forced to navigate a terrible betrayal and had come out the other side. The apologies from my family were sincere, and I knew I would eventually forgive them. But the trust had been broken, and I knew it would take time to rebuild. The drive home was quiet, the city lights blurring past my window. I was no longer defined by Sabrina's lie. I was defined by how I had survived it. The weeks that followed were a period of strange, delicate adjustment. The Sunday dinners resumed, but the atmosphere was fundamentally different. The easy, unspoken trust that had once defined our family was gone, replaced by a new, more cautious honesty. My parents treated me with a gentle reverence that was both comforting and unsettling. They were overly careful with their words, eager to make amends, often asking for my opinion on things just to show they were listening. My sister and I had a long, tearful conversation where she apologized profusely for her quick judgment, and we began the slow process of rebuilding our own fractured bond. It was as if Sabrina's lie had acted like a powerful earthquake, destroying the faulty structures of our family communication and forcing us to build something stronger and more authentic on the new ground. Throughout it all, my bond with Cameron deepened into something truly special. She was my hero, the ally who had appeared out of nowhere when I felt completely alone. We talked or texted almost daily, and she became my confidant, the one person who truly understood the depth of the betrayal without needing a lengthy explanation. She had given me back my life, and I would be eternally grateful. Her loyalty was a powerful reminder that family isn't just about the people you're related to by blood, it's about the people who choose to stand by you when it matters most. I found myself looking at my own family through a new lens, appreciating their efforts to make things right while also understanding their fallibility. They had been manipulated by a master, and their own love for Sabrina had been used as a weapon against them. As for me, the experience, as agonizing as it was, forged a new kind of strength within me. I learned to trust my own instincts, to listen to that nagging feeling in my gut instead of dismissing it as paranoia. I learned the hard way that someone can say all the right words and perform all the right actions and still be hiding a monstrous truth. The process of healing wasn't just about getting over Sabrina, it was about rediscovering myself outside of the relationship and the drama that had consumed my life. I started focusing on my career, my hobbies, and my friendships, rebuilding the parts of my identity that had been subsumed by our perfect relationship. I even took that solo trip to the cabin in the woods, not as a heartbroken woman, but as a woman who was choosing to find peace on her own terms. In the end, Sabrina's attempt to destroy me backfired in the most spectacular way. She had tried to write a story where I was the villain, but she hadn't counted on my cousin having the final chapter. The lie she so carefully constructed didn't just break my heart. It burned away everything that was false in my life, leaving only what was real and what was true. It was a painful, brutal fire, but from the ashes I emerged not as a victim, but as a survivor. The story she tried to tell about me was over. The one I would tell about myself was just beginning.